you very much for coming. I'm very pleased to have Novuyo with me here today. Thank you for accepting the invitation to come to this festival. We are very honored.
It's an honor.
And I'm very pleased that we're going to talk about the novel House of Stone today. But first, let me say a few introductory words about you and your work. Novuyo is the author of this mind-blowing novel, House of Stone, which was published last year, and it was longlisted for the Swansea University International Dylan Thomas Prize this year. In 2017, she received the Rockefeller Foundation's prestigious Bellagio Center Literary Arts Residency Award for her work. And she's a graduate of the Iowa Writers Workshop and a recipient of a Rhodes Award for Excellence in African Literature, in fiction as well. In fiction. So far, Novuyo has published a critically acclaimed short story collection, which is titled Shadows, and was released by Kwela in South Africa. And for this collection, she was awarded the 2014 Herman Charles Bosman Prize for the best literary work in English. Novuyo's writing has been featured in many anthologies, most recently in Max Sweeney's and in The Displaced, Refugee Writers on Refugee Lives. She also serves on the editorial advisory board and as a fiction editor at the Bare Life Review, which is a journal for refugee and immigrant literature based in San Francisco. She was born in Zimbabwe, has lived in South Africa and in the United States, and currently she is a guest here in Berlin at the Literarisches Kolloquium and will be residing at the beautiful Wannsee until the end of April, correct?
Yes. Okay.
And when I was preparing for this session, and also when I talked beforehand to people while I was reading House of Stone, I always found it hard to explain in a sentence what the book was about, because there's so many layers, different layers that you peel away as you go, and it's really hard to grasp all of it in a nutshell, but I'll try. It is a historical novel in a way. It deals a lot with history, but also with, as you put it, HI-story. How would you say it if you say it and not write it?
His story.
His
Well,
story.
say high story.
Yeah, okay. So, his story. And it also elaborates a lot on how history is told, how it is shaped, who decides what is history and what is not, and how that influences the way that we remember the past. But it also gradually turns into psychological study of deeply traumatized characters and their quest for belonging, and those characters feel like they are representative of deeply traumatized people, and in the end it is all connected in a way. And in the book you make the distinction between history and the story. What is the difference between the two for you, and how did you come up with the term the story?
Awesome. Thank you for this wonderful introduction. I'm really happy and excited to be here. So I think the easiest way to answer this, I actually found the perfect answer to that question after the novel was written recently. I was reading Michael Trujillo, the Haitian philosopher. He wrote a book called Silence in the Past about history, because I'm still working on another work about history, and that came into play. And he makes a really great distinction. It's something I do not have the exact words for, but I was using here, which is history as what happened in the past, which is history, and the narrative of what happened, which is, for me, his story. Right? The stories we tell around our histories and how we tell those stories, and how they shape our bearing in the present and how we thrust ourselves into the future. So that's the important distinction.
The actual plot of the book is set more or less in the present, in about 2007?
Yes, 2007.
Yes. So, but the characters' accounts of historical events and of their accounts of historical events reach back until the end of the 19th century and King Lobengula's fatal encounter with Cecil Rhodes throughout the war against the white minority rule in then Rhodesia, and on to Mugabe's inauguration in 1980 and shedding light on the histories that, or in the history that is not part of the national official telling of history, shedding light on the Kukurahundi genocide at the hands of Zimbabwe's then newly elected government, and also on the expropriation of white farmers in 2000 and so on and so on. So it really, there's a long stretch of time that is addressed in the book. And the very central character of the book, and who's the narrator as well, Zanani, very early on in the book, he states that a man could remake his past, could remake himself by remaking his past. Would you say that your novel is an attempt at remaking Zimbabwe by reclaiming the suppressed past?
I love that. I love the way you read that. Remaking Zimbabwe. I think that's accurate. So my initial project was to interrogate what is Zimbabwe, this idea, this philosophy, this dream that we are currently, nightmare, depending, that we're currently living. How did it come about, right? Because of course, before something takes place in the material world, it's first, it's first an idea, right? People have ideas, they come together, they plan, they act something out. So, so the idea for me, for Zamani really, of going back to the past, came from a realization that how we view ourselves, how we understand ourselves in the present changes depending on what we emphasize in the past, right? And so in Zimbabwe, you will find we have our, of course, the grand, very real and very relevant narrative, right, of Zimbabwe starting from the liberation struggle in the 70s. That is a very important aspect of our history, right, when Zimbabwe was born in 1980 from that struggle. And then, of course, there is what Helen Habila in The Guardian cleverly termed, I'm appropriating that term, Zimbabwe's original sin, which was the Kukurahundi genocide and massacres. So we're still not decided on what to call it. Right after independence in the early 80s, which was part and parcel of that project of building Zimbabwe. And so for me, those are two parallel narratives about the origins of what Zimbabwe is. And so for Zamani, for me, what I'm interested in is how to reclaim forgotten history, right, which is the genocide, but also how to put it in context, right, because it's very easy, especially with Africa, the contemporary discussions, to have this ahistorical discussion, especially of African suffering or genocide, as if it pops out of nowhere. So it was very important for me to situate that genocide within the larger context of Zimbabwe's history, indigenous history, King Lobengula, Rhodes, that arrival, right? And also it was important for me to keep an open mind in writing the novel. I wanted to discover things rather than impress what I already knew. And that was for me the joyful process of being surprised, being met with difficult characters, learning to love and understand characters I may otherwise not want to, or be compelled not to learn about, right, because of fear of the other. Things like race, racism, and all those things. So that was sort of the grand narrative that Zamani takes. And that's why he keeps dipping in and out of various people's histories, right? He's eavesdropping everywhere, wherever he can get information, he's getting that information, and he's processing that information. And whatever comes out may or may not be, right? May not have fealty to the original, but something new is coming out. And what's that thing that's coming out, and how is it changing Zamani as a person and the people he interacts with in the novel?
So there's a lot of very open criticism about powerful people in Zimbabwe, politically powerful people in Zimbabwe. Is the book available in Zimbabwe, or if it is, how do people react to it?
Well, it's not. I couldn't find a publisher in Zimbabwe, or haven't yet. I hope I mean in the future, and it's because of a particular character in the novel who I guess the publishers were rightly concerned they might get sued or they could get into trouble. The sort of legal ramifications of publishing the work there. It's a character called Black Jesus. There's no point in even trying to pretend. It's called Black Jesus. It's his parents' shoe. It's a fictionalized version, right? So satire, something which is allowed in spaces like Britain and the USA. You can satirize powerful leaders for fictional purposes. And he named himself Black Jesus during the liberation, which was his war name. And then in 1980, he led the special army that orchestrated the genocide. But in the novel, so I was really interested in Black Jesus because when I first encountered him, it was in the Catholic Church Commission reports from people, villagers who had encountered him, and they were quite horrific, very terrifying. And I was trying to figure out how am I going to deal with this terror in the novel. And then I was Googling him, and then I came across interesting information that, this man, he has a family, he has children. And then I'm like, oh wait, so he's a person, right? He's a person, and there are people who obviously love him out there, his children, his family. And immediately became a very sort of exciting sort of fictional figure for me because not a lot has been written about him, publicly or elsewhere. So I had the power of that enigma. I could take what little I knew and use it in the novel. So for me, he becomes this fictionalized figure who's a Mani. I will not spoil it for you, has an intimate relationship with, for whatever reasons, and tries to get close to, but becomes, I don't know if you want to say enamored of, swept up, blinded by the image in front of the figure. The idea of images, right, and trapdoors, and is what we see, really what's in front of us and how that works. So I was really using him as a fictional figure, but because there are references to things that really happened in the past, and a direct reference to him in the book, because many books, there are books that have been published about the genocide in Zimbabwe, right? Christopher Mlala's His Running with Mother. So of course, the publisher was trying to find out why this book, what's going on in this book that could be problematic.
Yes. So structurally, the book is made up of 3 parts, which are titled Book 1, 2, and 3. And in all of them, Zamani is the first person narrator, so everything is related to the reader through him. And he is a lodger with a couple who are the age of what could be his parents. And he's desperately trying to form family bonds with this couple. He is so desperate for their affection and wants to replace their missing son. And in book 1, Zamani tries to bond with what he calls his surrogate father, Abednego, a lot, and he reduces he seduces the recovering alcoholic with whiskey and with drugs to make him tell his personal stories. And when he doesn't respond to that anymore, he turns to the mother, to Mama Agnes, and which is then book 2. And in book 3, we learn more about Zaman himself, or more is revealed about him. And would you like to read us a little passage from the book?
Sure.
Introducing Zaman, maybe?
Yes, sure. I'm just going to read a very short passage at the beginning in the prologue. I think this should sufficiently stand on its own, and this is Zamani's voice. You can pretend I have a deep male voice. This is a male narrator. These intimacies about Kukura Hundi that my surrogate father has begun sharing with me are what Mukosi always wanted from him. The boy badgered our father about the family history. Baba, he would ask, at first timidly, for he anticipated the rage such questions caused Abednego, who was never stingy with the belt. Baba, although not even the prospect of the belt deterred him. I want to know, Baba. So strong was this desire. How did you grow up? Shimmering like a thing, hungry and searing and lost. Where were you during what was growing ever more defiant after I introduced him to Juno, who took him under his wing, like he had tried to do for me, feeding the boy's hunger to know the past. I need to know. You have to tell me. His 17-year-old voice booming with a dangerous bass, suddenly mature in its insolence, different from his usual Britishness. I demand to know what happened during the Burundi.
So, Zamani tells us the stories, all the stories that are related to him, and he incites very contradicting feelings, or at least in me as a reader. I think in everyone as a reader he will probably do, because he is creeping in on their lives in a way, and he may not be the most reliable narrator either. So who is Zamani?
Well, I can't give a straightforward answer, otherwise it will spoil the book for us.
But a cryptic one will do.
It's a cryptic one will do. So I mean, what we learn, actually, the important thing that we learn, which is apparent about the novel, is that there's a deep inner void in Zamani. You could call it sort of existentialist, sort of dread, longing, emptiness that he is trying to fill. And I guess, the idea of storiness and the way he appropriates, which is what he does, he appropriates stories and he, I wouldn't say manufactures, but he processes them, and what comes out becomes very personal for him. In some points, it's a bit perverse. I think there's one reader who said there's this Oedipal complex where he falls in love with a woman from his surrogate father, Abednego's past. A woman Abednego was in love with so much that he starts dreaming about her and imagining her and having fantasies of falling in love with her. So that's the sort of thing he does. And if a character in the past, so he gets so emotionally invested in things that didn't happen to him, such that it feels as if they happened to him. And if characters, right, if he's writing a story and he likes a character, but that character does something that he dislikes, he banishes them from the story, right? It's like, you're out, I'm not going to write about you. But the characters can come back later if something else happens to make him reflect, right? So that's sort of the sort of game and idea that he's playing. But the idea also of stories is also, because history, we place such authority on history, and yet it seems, and this for me was brought about by this idea of the genocide. Why something like the Burundi genocide, which was so atrocious, we had concentration camps, horrible things were done, it's not able to ignite what you'd expect to be fervor or indignation, or the right amount of anger, right, in a space like Zimbabwe, and the complicated reasons for that. But for me, it becomes the idea that facts, or what happens, seems to be less important to people than what they believe to be true, or what they assign value to, right? So it's a matter of value rather than events, which is something I could not understand at first, especially with the genocide, but in writing the novel, and which is what happens to Zamani, that becomes the sort of dichotomy, right, or tension. These things are happening versus what things do I ascribe meaning to. And of course, Zamani's amoral methods are not, they're an allegory for something bigger, right? The fact-finding missions of the colonial project, the post-colonial project as well in Zimbabwe, right? The way knowledge is extracted from people, things that are done to people, and then the narratives after the fact that are used to shape and give meaning and cover up or illuminate, right? It's all it's choice, right? And some of these truths we take for granted, especially in the collective imagination, are crafted truths, right? We don't think about them, but they've come to us in a certain way. And for me, watching Zamani play that game is to try and also bring awareness to how these things get to be crafted. Yeah.
And I think Zamani is also a powerful image of a cycle of violence in a way, because he has experienced violence of a certain kind. He has been stripped of his heritage, of his roots, he doesn't really know who he is or where he belongs, and he tries to find out. And in the process of doing that, of finding a place to belong, of trying to find a place to belong, he becomes people's nightmare. He does, though, and he becomes reckless as well in this quest for belonging, and inflicts violence on other people. Not necessarily physically, but mentally. He's a very manipulative character. And that makes him very special, I believe, because often the main character in the story is someone you would relate to. It is a likable person very often. And Zamani isn't really a likable person in that way. He's very ambiguous. And I was wondering how you felt writing this character. Do you feel that ambiguous to him as well? How did you feel about? Yeah.
So that's a complicated question. My relationship to Zamani as the person who conjured him up. Zamani was difficult to write in some aspects, and so during the editing process, I loved one of my editors said to me, I can see where you're trying to go with this, but if you're going to do this, you have to go the whole way. Like, if you're going to craft this character who is devious, who's very manipulative, who's diabolical, then we have to take it the full way. So he did encourage me, and I'm grateful for that, to not be afraid to go to those places, because the initial draft really pulled back. It was a bit polite, and I think it was also my fear or worry. Not so much about how it would be received, but the process of trying to get into such a head and then going to all the dark places. I will say that he was also fun to craft. Because hopefully, and what you're talking about, the irony, the distance between Zamani, there are things he's clearly not aware of about himself and the world that the reader becomes aware of. And I enjoyed at least having that distance where you're in his head, and I can see his head is very cluttered, and he's really, really filled with dread. But he's also, for some reason, incredibly funny and very humorous. And in the sense, so humor is, for me, is a really nice way of diffusing these tense moments. Because it's humor takes us to a relaxed place, is where maybe there's no relaxation. So pain, laughter, and kind laughter, unpleasant laughter, angry laughter. Right? Laughter has these different registers, which I try to infuse in the novel to at least have some relief from him. But also his plotting ways were fun for me, because I really wanted to figure out how far can I go with this guy, and what can he keep doing that will keep the reader reading whilst, still invested. Right? Because initially, I've had some readers, I had a friend who was really angry with Zamani towards the end, who was like, I wish Zamani would die, because they felt we sort of like him, but maybe not. But you cannot, in order for things to happen, we need Zamani to win, in quotation marks. If he does not win, we cannot actually get the truth of the story. Right? So finding out what really happened, what happens, the mysteries imbued with these other characters is tied to Zamani's success in his devious means. Right? And of course, to me, it's also the paradox of any collective identity. Nation, the nation is a violent state. You think of Mugabe as a very paradoxical man who's been very violent in Zimbabwe, but there's love and admiration as well as repulsion, right? There are those two things happening with him, right? What does that mean? How do we get to such a space? What does it mean to inhabit such a space? What lies or safe truths do we tell ourselves in order to stay in the space? What does it mean to have yourself exposed and to realize both the beauty and the horror of what you've invited yourself into?
And the humor is definitely one thing that makes it bearable to that makes it bearable.
Give me a little nudge there.
That makes it bearable to read about the atrocities that human beings inflict on each other. Mm-hmm. And another thing that really helps is I don't know what's wrong with this table though. That really helps is the beauty of the language that you use. Because I found myself reading some sentences 2 to 3 times just due to their wit and beauty, and I really loved that. And the story is also really captivating. And it kept me very invested in Zamani as well, because you really want to know what is he going to do next, and it doesn't really let you go, or didn't let me go. And so I can't say I enjoyed reading the book, but I loved it.
A lot, yeah.
In a way.
Discomfort, yeah.
Yes, there's a lot of discomfort. It's definitely not easily digestible, but definitely worth a read. So I would highly recommend reading that book. And I was wondering whether at the moment you were working on a new project, something that we have to look forward to if we already have a Red House of Stone. I'm waiting for something new by you.
I want to say, since I'm in Germany, and not since I'm in Germany, but so one writer who inspired, at least helped open up where I thought of my project when I was writing House of Stone was Gunter Grass. So I love German culture because you do have that history of madness, of the historical novel that is mad, that is demanding, that is uncomfortable, which was my experience of reading The Tin Drum in Oscar, in translation, of course. But I sort of love that book because of its playfulness, the different registers, and it definitely helped me think about what I was trying to do in terms of my own novel. So, project. I'm working on something different from House of Stone, with the second project, which is, I think, a way for me to bring relief from the idea of history. So instead of it being a big novel in terms of space, right, in terms of years, it's a very compact novel. It's set in Iowa City, where I lived a few years ago. But it's very spatial in terms of, I guess, psychological and emotional and mental landscape. So it's also a psychological study. It's autofiction, which is the big challenge, right? The autobiography, and the fictional. And so merging those forms has been a challenge for me, right? And the idea of what are you trying to do in the right autofiction, which is use fiction to get to higher truths that autobiography becomes kind of difficult.
So I want to thank you for this very insightful conversation. It was a pleasure. I want to thank you for your attention and for coming here. And
thank you so much.
Hope you enjoy the rest of the festival.